More than 1,300 researchers and communicators from 70 countries around the world traveled to San Francisco in November for the World Conference of Science Journalists. Among many topics under discussion is the concept of conflict of interest. To what ethical standards ought science communicators be held?
This session particularly was interesting to try and kind of understand where the divide is between being a science journalist per se and being a science communicator, maybe more broadly, doing kind of PR work.
Well, it's something I think about every day in my career because I'm a freelance journalist. I've been a freelance journalist for 10 years, and it's something that comes up in various assignments that you're working on, conferences you go to, different editors you're working with. It's always something I think that should be at the back of our minds, or actually really at the front of our minds.
As a fairly new freelancer, it's been really useful coming here and kind of talking to others and finding out about all the different ways in which a person can be a freelance science journalist or science communicator. And I don't know if there are any easy answers.
There probably not. It would be nice if there's some codified list that people could go to, but that doesn't exist. I think it would be really hard to make that exist.
So why are we talking about this? There are no guidelines around conflicts of interest, particularly for freelancers, although the NASW here in the US is actually now currently working on developing some kind of advice around this. As I suspect we all know, there are far fewer in-house jobs available these days in science journalism, so most of the content that we read is being generated by freelancers. It's kind of tricky to make a living purely as a freelance science journalist. I'm yet to meet someone who actually manages to do that, which means that most science journalists and freelancers are supplementing their income.
So how do you afford that if you can't even pay your bills because all the fees in science journalism? There's no clear definition about what science journalism is. It's like there's this confusion between science journalism and science communication.
So one thing I've tried is to keep these two poles very separate, but it is very hard to do that because at least in my region of the world, a lot of this, I don't have access to that many good science journalists.
But the problem is because there are not so many places to go to work as a science journalist. Many science journalists go to academia, to university.
In the current political climate, I don't think we need much reminding that the media is increasingly being undermined by accusations of bias, by accusations of having hidden agendas. So more than ever before, there's a lot of pressure on journalists. You know, we are the guardians of truth, but we are all very susceptible to influence, often in a myriad of subtle ways. We're all human. There's no reason to think that as journalists, things are going to be any different for us.
I was working on a piece that halfway through after I had the assignment and I was already halfway done recording it and writing it, I found out that part of the research I was writing about was also funded by that organization. And it's a different group of people that are funding these sorts of things, but it's still money coming from the same place. And I felt strange about it, and I emailed my editor and asked if he thought it was a big deal, and he didn't think it was a big deal, and he did not write a disclosure in my piece. But I think one, informing your editor and then working with them whether you should be taken off the piece or you should be, they should be handing it to someone else, or you need to have a disclosure in the text or in a little box somewhere on the piece is probably the best practice.
I don't know if you know this, but in Spanish there's no translation for full disclosure. I don't know if someone here is from Latin America, but the thing is, I try many times to pull the full disclosure at the end of the article, and the editor like just erases it.
The relationship between the freelance journalist and the editor, it should be a very strong partnership, and very open and very supportive. And at the end, both get it's really beneficial for both sides.
So the problem is also cultural. What's the role of science in your country? Is something that is in the center of the culture, something that is in the edges? Should you promote science, but at the end you don't want to be a cheerleader?
A lot of science journalists in the Middle East, I would say, are not aware of conflict of interest. They are not aware of what would constitute conflict of interest and to draw the line, where to draw a line. If they need to draw a line, they might not even know that they need to draw a line. We, as in associations or the federations, should be able to uphold these journalistic values.
Interesting. It sounds like those lines are becoming increasingly blurred. You know, as more and more people turn to more PR sort of jobs to supplement their income as a science journalist.
There's always been this sort of tension between advertising to support journalism and historically there's been a divide there between church and state where it's different people working on these things and there's not any crossover, but that's getting increasingly blurred actually with sponsored content and stuff like that, which is a problem.
These problems to a certain extent are becoming harder to deal with, maybe because increasingly people are turning to more kind of PR, science communication jobs to make a living.
I mean, we're in a sort of crisis of media and journalism because we don't have the funding we need to do the work we need in a lot of cases, and publications feel that, individual journalists and freelancers feel that.
But it sounds like maybe there are plans in the early stage to kind of really elucidate clarification and make things easier for people in the future. But then, we can talk about it all we want, right? But sometimes you're going to have to actually do something as well.
Jeez.